He crash-landed on a planet where Huntresses pursue men. Now they battle over him. The Nebula Runner tore through the upper atmosphere, its frame groaning under the strain as Mason gripped the flight controls with white-knuckled desperation. The ship shuddered beneath him, every alarm shrieking at a different frequency. Acrid smoke billowed from the instrument panel, stinging his eyes, as warning lights blazed across the console, a frantic kaleidoscopic dance of red and amber. "Come on, hold together," Mason muttered, voice tight, as he slammed the emergency thrusters. A final explosion thundered through the hull. The starboard engine ruptured in a spray of burning plasma, spinning the ship into a wild spiral. Gravity yanked him sideways. Branches whipped past the viewport, a blur of green and gold. Then the world erupted in chaos. Shrill metallic screams, the splintering crack of wood, the jolt of impact rattling through his bones, before darkness crashed down over his senses. He came to with a gasp, body throbbing with pain, the taste of blood in his mouth. Dazed, Mason blinked against the bruised light. The shattered cockpit lay draped in luminescent vines, casting an eerie green glow. Alien flora pressed in, tall, pulsing stalks crowned with jewel-bright flowers, their petals shimmering in the haze. The air was thick and humid, each breath filled with the scent of earth and strange spice. Distantly, animal cries echoed, harsh, unfamiliar calls that seemed to draw closer. Gritting his teeth, Mason forced himself upright, fighting waves of nausea. He reached instinctively for his flight suit's emergency beacon, his lifeline, his only hope of rescue. But the harness was torn, his pockets empty. He raked the cockpit with desperate eyes, heart sinking as he saw only twisted metal and scorched debris. No beacon, no signal, no hope. He staggered from the wreckage, boots sinking into spongy moss, each step scraping fire through his battered muscles. The forest pressed close, its shadows alive with movement, the silence heavy and watchful. Mason turned in a slow circle, forcing his panic down. He was alone, utterly alone, marooned on a world no rescue team would ever find. A low tremor rippled through the ground, rattling the leaves. Mason froze, pulse racing. Another tremor, stronger this time. He crouched, scanning the tangled undergrowth, heart hammering in his throat. Figures emerged from the shadows, tall women, their forms both beautiful and terrifying. Their skin glowed with an internal light, shifting from gold to crimson beneath the canopy. Flame-red hair rippled down their backs, wild and untamed. Eyes like molten amber flickered with intelligence and danger. Their ears tapered to elegant points, and tattoos, glowing, intricate patterns, wound along their arms and shoulders, pulsing with each heartbeat. They wore armor that flowed like liquid metal, shifting in color and shape as they moved. Spears of polished bone and crystal glinted in their hands. Their approach was silent, predatory. Mason tried to back away, but they circled him, cutting off every escape. One stepped forward, taller and more imposing than the rest. Her presence was magnetic, her gaze sharp and analytical. She raised a hand, and the others stilled. Her voice rang out, clear and commanding. Words Mason couldn't understand, but there was no mistaking the authority in her tone. He raised his hand slowly, trying to show he meant no harm. "I'm not your enemy," he managed, voice hoarse. "My ship. Crash. Help." The leader's eyes narrowed. She gave another command. Two warriors lunged forward, gripping Mason's arms with surprising strength. He struggled, but it was useless. They bound his wrists with a flexible cord that seemed to tighten with his every movement. Mason was marched through the jungle, flanked by his silent captors. The path twisted among massive trees whose branches arched high overhead, forming a vaulted ceiling of green. The air was alive with noise, drums, laughter, the crackle of fire. At last, they emerged into a clearing dominated by a breathtaking settlement, homes woven into the living trees, bridges of vines connecting platforms that spiraled up into the heights. It was a fortress as much as a village, vibrant with life and celebration. He was pushed into a cage of interlacing roots, the bars warm and pulsing beneath his fingers. Warriors and children gathered, whispering, pointing, their curiosity palpable. Mason met their gazes, searching for any sign of empathy, but saw only suspicion and fascination. The tribe's matriarch, a regal elder named Vela, watched from a raised platform. Her hair was streaked with silver, her tattoos brighter than any others. She leaned forward, studying him with a scholar's interest. But it was the leader, Sira, who returned again and again. She approached in the dusk, her armor catching the firelight, her movements liquid and sure. Sometimes she questioned him, her words strange, but her meaning clear. Sometimes she simply watched, gaze inscrutable. One evening, as shadows flickered on the bars, Sira stepped close. Mason was repairing a battered fragment of his communicator, hands hidden in his lap. He looked up as her fingers slipped through the cage, cool and sure, tracing the line of an old scar on his cheek. "Battle?" she asked, voice softer than before. He held her gaze. "Accident. Long time ago." Her touch sent a chill along his jaw, coldly clinical, yet oddly intimate. Mason swallowed, uncertain whether to flinch or lean into her palm. Sira's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "You are strong, but not of here." "No," Mason breathed. "Not of here." She withdrew, her eyes lingering. The moment hung between them, fragile as spun glass. All the while, Mason concealed the damaged communicator, coaxing life from its broken circuits in secret. Each night, he worked by the faint light of phosphorescent vines, soldering with makeshift tools, hope flickering with every progress and setback. Unbeknownst to him, the matriarch Vela watched his efforts, her expression a mix of intrigue and approval, measuring his persistence, his ingenuity, and the spark of something new he brought to their forgotten world. Mason was led into the jungle, wrists bound, to witness the Emberkins' hunt, a display of their prowess. The procession was swift and silent, his escorts moving with feline grace through the tangled undergrowth. Branches brushed his arms, dew beating on his skin. Sira walked just ahead, her flaming hair a beacon in the emerald gloom. The other huntresses cast him furtive glances, some curious, some appraising. They halted at the edge of a clearing. Sira gave a low command, and the warriors fanned out, their armor flowing over limbs in seamless, living ripples. The air vibrated with anticipation. Mason caught the scent of musky earth and something metallic, blood, old and fresh. Through a gap in the foliage, he glimpsed their quarry, a hulking beast armored in plates of mineral and chitin, snout rooting in the loam. Its breath was a wet snarl, yellow eyes flickering with primal malice. Sira spoke in her language, her tone clipped and urgent. The huntresses nodded, melting into the shadows. Mason watched as they moved, silent, coordinated, each step echoing centuries of tradition. Their spears flashed in the dimness. Even bound and surrounded, he felt a thrill at their artistry. Suddenly, a sharp cry split the air. The beast reared, a young warrior tangled beneath its claws. Mason saw terror in her golden eyes as the creature pressed her into the mud, jaws yawning wide. Instinct roared through him. With a wrench, he snapped the bonds at his wrists. Pain searing across his skin, he hurled himself from the brush, shouting, "Over here! Hey!" The monster's head whipped toward him, fangs dripping. Mason grabbed a fallen spear, adrenaline burning away caution. He jabbed at the creature's flank, drawing its fury. The beast lunged, claws raking his arm. Mason staggered but held firm, buying precious seconds as Sira darted in, her movements a blur. With a guttural cry, she drove her spear deep into the beast's throat. Blood sprayed, dark and steaming. The creature convulsed, then collapsed in a shuddering heap. Sira fell to her knees beside Mason, her breath ragged. She tore a strip from her own shimmering armor, pressing it to his bleeding arm. Her fingers worked deftly, her touch lingering longer than necessity required. You are reckless, she murmured, voice trembling between scold and gratitude. Foolish, brave. He winced as she tightened the bandage. Couldn't let her die. I've seen enough loss. Syrah's eyes softened, the fire in them dampened by something gentler. You risked for us. Behind them, the rescued huntress bowed her head to Mason, her pride tempered by respect. I owe you my life, Sky Stranger, she said, the words halting but sincere. Other warriors approached, offering nods and murmured thanks. Even Vela, the matriarch, emerged from the tree line, her gaze appraising. For the first time, Mason felt the weight of scrutiny shift. No longer just an outsider, but someone who had bled for their kin. Back at the settlement, the mood had changed. As dusk settled, Syrah's visits became more frequent. She would linger by his side, hands tracing the lines of his arms, her voice softer, her laughter freer. Their conversations, a halting blend of words and gestures, grew intimate. One night, as the tribe's fires burned low, Syrah knelt beside him in the shadows. Her fingers brushed his wrist, the touch electric. You heal fast, Mason, she teased, her voice husky. Your medicine helps, he replied, catching her gaze. Or maybe it's your company. She smiled, eyes smoldering. You like Emberkin company? I think I do, he whispered, drawn to her warmth, her strength, the unspoken promise in her nearness. Syrah leaned in, her breath ghosting over his cheek. You are not like our men, yet you make my blood fire. Mason's heart hammered. He reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from her brow. And you? You make me forget I crashed here by accident. She pressed his hand between hers, fierce and possessive. You are no accident. You are meant. The tension between them grew, every encounter thick with longing. When Syrah walked away, Mason's skin burned where she had touched him. Days passed. The tribe prepared for a great rite, and Syrah insisted Mason witness. He stood beside her as the Emberkin Huntresses circled a tall, broad-shouldered male, one of their own, but rare. The women competed in feats of strength and wit, their faces alight with desire and determination. Mason watched, realization dawning. Here, men were precious, their genetic legacy fiercely sought after. He glanced at Syrah. Her posture was rigid, her gaze fixed on him rather than the ritual. The others watched him too, whispers swirling. Syrah's hand found his, her grip tight, her body pressed close. The message was clear. He belonged to her. That night, as the settlement quieted, Syrah returned to Mason's shelter. She hesitated at the threshold, vulnerability softening the angles of her face. Mason, she began, struggling with the unfamiliar syllables. You see our right. You know why we need you. He nodded. You want children, to survive. Her eyes glistened, pride and fear warring in her expression. Our men are few, fewer each year. I choose you, not just for the tribe, for hope, for me. Mason reached for her, thumb tracing the edge of her jaw. And I choose you, Syrah, if I have a choice. Her breath caught, relief and longing mingling as she leaned into his touch. Together, then, she whispered. Their lips brushed, tentative at first, then hungry. For the first time since his crash, Mason felt the ache of loneliness ease, replaced by connection, by something wild and tender. The moment shattered as a piercing cry echoed through the trees. The village erupted in alarm, warriors racing to the barricades. Mason grabbed Syrah's arm, but she pulled free, eyes blazing. Night Shroud, she spat, voice icy. They come. He glimpsed figures at the edge of the firelight. Tall, shadow-cloaked women, their skin midnight blue, their armor studded with jagged obsidian. At their head stood Kayla, eyes cold as a dying star. Kayla's voice rang out, sharp as a blade. You hold what is not yours, Syrah. The sky prize is for the strongest. Syrah stepped forward, placing herself between Mason and the invaders. Her chin lifted, every line of her body defiant. "He is mine," Sira declared, her words echoing across the clearing. "If you would take him, you must prove you're right." Kayla's lips curled in a predatory smile. "So be it. Trials, then. Let the gods choose." The Emberkin and Night Shroud bristled, tension crackling in the humid air. Mason's heart pounded as he realized his fate hung on the outcome of contests he barely understood. Sira drew him behind her body a living shield. As the tribe squared off, Mason met Sira's gaze. In her eyes burned determination and the promise that whatever trials lay ahead, she would fight for him, not as a prize, but as her chosen. The first trial was a hunt for elusive shadow beasts, insubstantial, shifting creatures with dark, vaporous forms and a chilling psychic hunger. At dawn, the Emberkin and Night Shroud gathered at the jungle's edge, spears gleaming and nerves taut. A hush fell as the matriarchs explained the rules in their harsh musical tongue. Whichever tribe returned with the most shadow beast pelts would claim victory. Sira glanced at Mason, her eyes fierce with resolve. "Stay close," she whispered. "Shadow beasts hunt minds, not flesh." Mason nodded, heart pounding. "I'll watch your back," he promised, scanning the mist-choked undergrowth. As the hunt began, both tribes fanned out intense silence. The Night Shroud moved like phantoms, slipping between shafts of light. The Emberkin advanced more boldly, their tattoos glowing with anticipation. Mason kept pace beside Sira, noting the subtle ways the shadow beast distorted the air, a rippling, oily shimmer just above the ground. He caught Sira's attention, drawing a quick diagram in the dirt with a stick, a line representing the breeze, and an X where the vaporous forms seemed to gather. Sira's eyes widened in understanding. She signaled her warriors, adjusting their path in response to Mason's improvised map. With Mason's help, the Emberkins skirted an ambush, circling the shadow beasts instead of stumbling into their midst. As the creatures lunged, tendrils of darkness reaching for exposed minds, Mason clapped his hands, drawing their attention just long enough for Sira to strike from behind. The Emberkin worked as one, moving in perfect synchrony. Whenever a shadow beast appeared, Mason gestured warnings, 2 fingers for right, a fist for danger. Sira caught his signals with lightning intuition, her spear flashing through the vaporous bodies, dispersing their chilling forms. When the last shadow beast collapsed into mist, Mason's skin tingled, mind momentarily grazed by their hunger. Kayla's warriors emerged from the gloom, empty-handed and sullen. Kayla herself glared at Mason, jaw clenched. The matriarchs counted the Emberkin pelts, more than double the Night Shroud's tally. The Emberkin let out triumphant cries, Sira's name echoing through the canopy. Kayla's frustration was barely concealed, her eyes promising retribution. The second trial began before the victory celebrations could settle. The contestants were led to a labyrinth of carnivorous plants, massive blossoms with iridescent petals and venomous snapping maws. The path was a winding tangle of vines and deadly beauty. Vela addressed the Emberkin, her voice carrying over the anxious murmurs. "Strength alone will not win here. Use your minds. Work together." Sira squeezed Mason's shoulder, hope flickering in her gaze. "This time, your wisdom." Inside the labyrinth, progress slowed to a crawl. Warriors hacked at vines, but the plants responded, snapping and coiling tighter. Mason crouched beside a toppled log, studying the tangled geometry. He drew a quick sketch in the dirt with a sharp stone, explaining with gestures and simple words. "If we lift here, the weight shifts, like a lever." Sira caught on immediately, relaying instructions. Mason found a sturdy branch and lashed it to the log with a vine, fashioning a makeshift pulley. With coordinated effort, the Emberkin hoisted the log, opening a safe passage. The tribe followed, awe written across their faces. A sudden shriek rang out. The Night Shroud, caught in a patch of snapping blossoms, struggled to free themselves. Kayla shot Mason a look of pure frustration as the Emberkins surged ahead, unscathed. Vela herself paused at the exit, nodding in approval at Mason's ingenuity. The whispers among the warriors grew. Now they valued his mind as much as his body. The final trial was the most perilous. Another hunt, this time under the tangled boughs where the shadow beasts were thickest. Syrah led her team, Mason at her side, the air crackling with tension. The jungle pressed close, shadows writhing with threat. Midway through the hunt, disaster struck. A shadow beast, larger and fiercer than the rest, lunged at Syrah from the gloom. Its tendrils wrapped her, probing for thoughts and fears. Mason didn't hesitate. He threw himself between them, arms wide. "Stay away from her!" he yelled, his voice echoing through the branches. The shadow beast recoiled, its psychic hunger turning on him. A wave of cold dread crashed over Mason, memories surfacing. Fire, loss, the void of space. He fought back, clinging to thoughts of Syrah, of her fierce eyes and the warmth of her touch. Syrah rallied, driving her spear through the beast's core. It dissolved in a hiss of darkness. She spun and caught Mason as he sagged, breath ragged. "Why?" she whispered, her hands trembling as they framed his jaw. "Couldn't lose you," Mason murmured, searching her gaze. She pressed her forehead to his, lips brushing his cheek. "Foolish, brave man," she whispered fiercely, then kissed him, hungry, desperate, grateful. Her body pressed to his, arms tight around his neck. The tribes watched, silent witnesses to a bond that had become undeniable. Vela's voice rang out. "Let all see. Syrah and the Sky Prize are one." Kayla's fury simmered at the clearing's edge, her composure cracking. She turned away, barking orders to her warriors, but her eyes never left Mason and Syrah. In the uneasy peace that followed, Mason and Syrah stole rare moments together. One afternoon, Syrah led him through a curtain of moss to a hidden glade. At its heart stood a stone monolith, ancient glyphs carved into its weathered face. Syrah traced the symbols with reverent fingers, her voice soft. "Our story, before the wars." When all were equals. Mason studied the carvings, scenes of men and women hunting together, sharing in triumph and grief. He touched a weathered image, a pair standing side by side, hands entwined. "What happened?" he asked gently. Syrah's expression darkened. Night came. Fear. Men taken, hidden, lost. She swallowed, gesturing to herself. "Now few men. We fight for them, not with them. Lost balance." Mason covered her hand with his own. "It doesn't have to stay lost." She met his gaze, vulnerability raw in her eyes. "With you, I remember hope." They sat together, tracing the story in stone, words unnecessary. In that quiet glade, a new vulnerability blossomed between them. A connection forged not only of passion, but of shared history and dreams for a future beyond survival. Later, as the sun dipped and the trial fires began to burn, Mason and Syrah returned to the settlement, hands entwined. The memory of ancient equality lingered between them, a promise echoing through every look and touch. Their bond was no longer simply desire, it had become something deeper, a partnership strong enough to challenge the old divisions, even as Kayla's rage threatened to ignite the next storm. Kayla escalated her campaign, poisoning the Emberkins' water and sabotaging their food stores. The first warning came with the dawn. A young scout staggered into the central clearing, clutching her stomach, lips stained an unnatural black. Cries of alarm rippled through the tribe. Syrah was at her side instantly, barking orders for clean water, scanning the settlement with hawk-like intensity. Mason moved among the warriors, examining the water cistern. A foul chemical tang hung in the air, unfamiliar yet unmistakably dangerous. He knelt by the storage urns, dipping his fingers into the darkened water. "Don't drink this," he warned. urgency sharpening his voice. It's been tainted, some kind of neurotoxin. Spread the word. Syrah's eyes flashed with fury. Kayla, she spat, the name a curse. She wants us weak before the moon's rise. We need to check the food stores, Mason said, already moving. He and a group of emberkin tore through the woven granaries, discovering caches ruined, roots rotted, meat slick with foreign mold. Supplies for the coming days were ruined. Vela gathered the tribe in a circle of firelight, her voice low and grave. We will not starve, nor fall to shadows. Prepare. The night shroud will come under the moons. Syrah doubled Mason's guard, posting warriors outside their shelter. She prowled the perimeters, every sense straining. That night, the jungle itself seemed to hold its breath, a hush settling over the ancient trees. The twin moons rose, casting silver and violet light through the branches. Mason found Syrah sharpening her spear, her jaw set. He touched her shoulder. You're not alone in this, he said quietly. Her eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. With you, I am stronger. But if they breach our walls, they won't, Mason promised, though uncertainty gnawed at him. We're ready. The night shroud attack came in silence, broken only by the whistle of arrows and the hiss of blades slicing through foliage. Their warriors surged through the outer defenses, obsidian weapons gleaming in the bioluminescent night. The emberkin met them in a clash of metal and fury. Mason kept close to Syrah, but his mind worked furiously, scanning the battlefield. He spotted a night shroud unit circling toward the food stores and shouted a warning. They're flanking left! Block the bridge, now! Syrah relayed the order, and a knot of emberkin intercepted the raiders with a coordinated counterattack. When a group of night shroud tried to overwhelm the central hearth, Mason seized a fallen shield, using its mirrored surface to reflect moonlight into the invaders' eyes. He called, "Blind them! Use the light!" Emberkin warriors hurled shards of polished metal, dazzling their foes and turning the tide. The skirmishes raged through the living fortress. Mason ducked a thrown spear, rolling behind a root wall, and spotted a tripwire of vine. He grinned. Perfect. Working quickly, he rerouted the vine through a notch in the roots. As Kayla's elite advanced, the trap snapped, roots slamming down to block their path. The emberkin whooped, rallying around Mason's ingenuity, but the heart of the battle drew Syrah and Kayla inexorably together. Kayla stalked through the carnage, obsidian blades spinning, seeking her rival. Syrah met her in the open, weapons clashing in a storm of sparks. Their duel was brutal, a contest of strength, speed, and sheer will. Kayla taunted Syrah as they fought, her voice cold. You are weak, Syrah, softened by your sky prize. Syrah's reply was a growl. You know nothing of strength. They traded blows, each strike more vicious than the last. Kayla fainted, slipped inside Syrah's guard, and landed a heavy blow to her side. Syrah staggered, pain written across her face. Kayla pressed the advantage, blade poised for a killing stroke. Mason saw it happening. Without thinking, he grabbed a thick vine from the fallen barricade and sprinted forward. As Kayla lunged, Mason flicked the vine low, catching her ankle. She toppled, her blade spinning from her grasp. Mason pounced, pinning her wrist before she could recover. The battlefield fell silent. Both tribes watched, breathless, as Mason knelt above Kayla. He met her eyes, anger, fear, and pride swirling in their depths. He released her wrist and tossed the blade aside. No more killing, Mason said, voice steady. We're done. Kayla stared at him, chest heaving. The concept of mercy was alien, unthinkable, yet something in Mason's gaze, unyielding, unwavering, cut through her fury. Slowly she pushed herself up, bowing her head in surrender. Kayla's voice rang out, rough but clear. I yield. The fight is ended. The Night Shroud lowered their weapons, confusion and relief mingling on their faces. Emberkin warriors blinked in disbelief, then slowly began to cheer. The tension in the air unraveled, replaced by a stunned sense of possibility. Vela approached, her posture regal. She regarded Mason for a long moment, then gave a formal nod, no longer to a captive, but to a peer. The young huntress Mason had once saved found him in the crowd, clasping his hand in silent gratitude. Syrah stepped forward, her eyes shining with fierce pride and love. She twined her fingers with Mason's, raising their joined hands for all to see. In the Emberkin tongue, her voice rang out, clear and resolute. "He is not my possession. He is my chosen, my equal." The warriors around them pressed hands to hearts in salute, the old barriers between tribes and genders melting beneath the light of twin moons. Syrah drew Mason close, her forehead resting against his. For the first time, Mason felt wholly accepted, not as a resource or a relic, but as a partner, and as hope for a future the Emberkin would build together. The tribe erupted in celebration, feasting, music, and wild dances beneath the glowing canopy. As the twin moons sailed overhead, laughter and song soared through the living fortress. Emberkin warriors painted each other's arms with swirling patterns of victory, and the air pulsed with the rhythm of drums made from hollowed trunks and stretched animal hide. Dancers whirled in the phosphorescent light, shadows flickering across the woven bridges, while elders and children alike pressed close to the great fire in the center of the settlement. Syrah and Mason stood side by side, hands entwined, as the tribe toasted them with cups of sweet fermented nectar. The young huntress Mason had saved pressed a carved bone cup into his palm and grinned, her eyes bright. "Drink, Sky Partner," she called. "You are Emberkin now." Mason laughed, warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the drink. Syrah smiled, fierce and proud, her gaze never leaving his. For a moment, Mason allowed himself to forget every hardship that had brought him here. He was not merely accepted, he was celebrated. As the revelry deepened, Syrah drew Mason away from the fire, slipping through a curtain of flowering vines to the sanctuary she called her own. The chamber was alive with soft light and the scent of night-blooming petals. Syrah turned to face him, her powerful, luminous form radiant with anticipation. She reached for him, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, her touch confident and reverent. "Tonight, there are no tribes," she whispered. "Only us." Mason cupped her cheek, voice husky. "I want nothing more." She pressed him back onto the bed of woven leaves and moss, her body moving over his with practiced grace. Their lips met in a kiss that was both fierce and searching, each movement a silent promise. Syrah's armor melted away in rivulets of liquid metal, revealing skin that glowed with molten gold, her hair fanned around them, wild as the jungle itself. Mason's hands roamed her strong back, tracing the stories written in ink and light along her shoulders and arms. She straddled him, her gaze smoldering. "You are strong, Mason, but here, you are safe." He drew her down, their bodies pressed together, his own need rising to match hers. "With you, I belong." The night unfurled in a blur of sensation, Syrah's confident caresses, Mason's eager response, the gentle strength in her embrace. She explored him as if mapping new territory, every kiss a declaration, every touch a question and an answer. Mason surrendered to her, and she to him, their passion a blend of strength and tenderness. Barriers that had once separated them, language, culture, fear, were dissolved in the heat of their union. Afterward, Syrah cradled Mason against her, her breath steady in the hush. He ran his hand through her hair, feeling the steady pulse beneath her skin. "You trusted me," he said quietly. Syrah smiled against his shoulder. "Trust is the first truth between equals." They drifted together into sleep, bodies entwined, a new future blossoming in the space between their heartbeats. In the cycles that followed, Mason became more than a symbol. he became an architect of change. He and Sira worked side by side to rebuild what had been lost. Mason showed the tribe how to dig irrigation ditches that channeled rainwater to their crops, teaching the Emberkin children how to judge the slope and flow by watching the water's course. "See," he explained, drawing diagrams in the dirt, "the water goes where you want it. You don't have to chase the river, you can shape it." The elders watched with keen interest as Mason demonstrated simple food preservation, smoking meat over slow fires, sealing dried fruit in woven baskets with heated wax. "This way, you eat when the storms come," he explained, holding up a strip of preserved root. "No more hunger." Sira's laughter was bright as she lifted a basket of the new food to the sky. "He brings us plenty," she teased, grinning at Mason. "And strange flavors." The tribe adopted his techniques eagerly, adapting them to their needs. Mason rigged pulleys from twisted vines, easing the labor of hauling water and supplies to the treetop dwellings. Warriors who had once viewed him with suspicion now sought his advice, and children followed him everywhere, eager to learn. The young huntress, now proudly scarred from battle, became his most enthusiastic student. "You think like the jungle, Mason," she told him one evening, watching a new irrigation channel fill. "You make us stronger." Sira wrapped her arm around his waist. "He makes us wiser," she said, planting a kiss on his temple. As the Emberkin flourished, word spread beyond their borders. The tribe's neighbors sent envoys, curious, wary, then intrigued. Mason greeted them with Sira at his side, offering gifts of preserved fruit, clever tools, and open hands. The envoys watched the Emberkin closely. They saw the men of the tribe walk freely among the women, not as prizes or property, but as companions and equals. They saw Mason and Sira lead not by force, but by unity, consulting each other on every decision, sharing laughter and burdens alike. The old customs began to shift. Some envoys returned with new ideas, speaking of partnerships rather than conquests. In the evenings, Mason and Sira would walk to the ancient stone covered in glyphs, tracing the stories together. Sira spoke softly, translating the symbols. "Long ago, men and women stood as one. We lost that. But we find it again, together." Mason squeezed her hand. "We're making a new story, Sira." She smiled, pressing her forehead to his. "A story they will remember." The wisdom of the ancient glyphs was revived in every council and every home. The Emberkin elders recited old proverbs and new ones, children memorizing lessons of partnership and trust. Hunters paired off by skill, not by gender. Old rivalries softened, replaced by the thrill of shared triumphs and discoveries. On a night of celebration, with the tribe feasting under lanterns and the twin moons high, Sira raised her cup and called for silence. "We honor Mason," she declared, "not as a captive but as a partner. He is one of us. He is mine, and I am his." The tribe roared approval. Mason rose, heart full, and took Sira's hand. Their partnership, tested in battle, cemented in trust, had become a living symbol. Old ways faded, and a new era dawned beneath the glowing trees, one of mutual respect, equality, and hope for a future only they could build together. Years passed, and the jungle world of Emberis transformed. Where once ancient rivalries divided the tribes, now bridges of vine and song linked their settlements. The Emberkin's laughter echoed through the vast canopy, no longer guarded, but open and free. Under Mason and Sira's guidance, peace flourished, and the world itself seemed to breathe easier. The most remarkable change was in the Emberkin themselves. The male population, once dwindling and fiercely protected, recovered as old taboos fell away. Tribes mingled, sharing not just customs and knowledge, but lives. Marriages were forged between warriors who had once faced each other as enemies. Now, children with dusk-hued skin and eyes that shimmered from green to gold ran wild in the tangled gardens, voices bright with possibility. Mason and Sira's children were among them, hybrids, the first of their kind. Their eldest, Lyra, darted between tree homes with her brother in tow, their laughter pealing like bells. Lyra's skin glimmered with a subtle inner light, her hair the color of midnight with streaks of ember. Her brother, Terran, had Mason's stubborn chin and Syrah's amber-flecked eyes, and a mind quick as lightning. Villagers often paused to watch the siblings race through the mossy arches, their feet sure on the bridges Mason had helped design. "Slow down," Mason called one afternoon, smiling as Terran leapt from a low branch and landed beside him. Terran grinned, breathless. "Mama says you ran fast once." Mason knelt, ruffling his son's hair. "Your mother could outrun any beast in the jungle. I just tried not to fall behind." Syrah approached, regal as ever, a newborn cradled to her chest. Her tattoos glowed softly in the fading light, her eyes alive with warmth. "You did more than keep up, Mason," she teased. "You changed everything." He rose to meet her, touching her cheek. "We changed it together." Their family was the heart of the new Emberkin society, a living promise that old boundaries could be crossed and new futures made. Syrah's matriarchal authority had softened, now shaped by dialogue and shared vision. She presided over council meetings with Mason at her side, her words no longer law alone, but a conversation. One evening, as a storm rumbled beyond the treetops, Syrah and Mason gathered with the elders and young leaders. The council fire crackled, painting their faces in gold and crimson. "We have a proposal from the River Clan," Vela announced, older now but still sharp-eyed. "They wish to send their daughters to apprentice here." Syrah looked to Mason, her gaze inviting. "What do you think, partner?" He considered. "It's a good sign. They want what we have, a place where every voice matters. Let's welcome them." The council murmured approval. Syrah nodded. "We will teach them what we've learned, how to thrive, together." The children had their own council as well. Lyra gathered her friends in a circle beneath the moonlit branches. "We will build a bridge to the River Clan's village," she declared, hands on her hips. Terran raised a brow. "Do you know how?" She stuck out her tongue. "Papa will show us. He can build anything." Mason laughed as the young ones dragged him to the edge of the clearing, chattering about rope and wood, eager to test what they'd learned. He saw himself reflected in their curiosity, their refusal to accept impossible as an answer. In the seasons that followed, the Emberkin flourished. Their gardens grew in abundance, fed by clever irrigation channels. The food stores overflowed with preserved fruits and smoked meats, and no child went hungry. Mason's inventions, simple pulleys, sun-powered ovens, new ways to weave shelters, spread across the world. Villagers from distant regions arrived, eager to learn. The change was not just in technology. Old stories, once used to enforce fear and division, were retold around the fire as lessons in unity. Syrah's voice rang out in the evenings, weaving tales of the ancient glyphs, of a time when men and women hunted side by side. She spoke of the outlander who fell from the sky and found a home in the heart of the Emberkin. Sometimes, Mason would take her hand as she spoke, their children pressed close. "The story isn't just about me," he'd say softly. Syrah smiled, threading her fingers through his. "It's about us, and what we made possible." Their early passion had deepened, weathered by years of challenge and triumph. The fierce urgency that had once drawn them together had become a steady flame, an enduring love, fierce in its devotion, gentle in its daily presence. When disputes arose, they faced them together. When joy found them, it was doubled by being shared. Other tribes watched the transformation and changed in turn. The Night Shroud, once Syrah's bitterest rivals, sent gifts and envoys. Where once they had seen Mason as a prize to be won, now they treated him as a friend, eager for his counsel and stories. Their own men, once hidden away, walked in the sun, side by side with their partners. The children of Emberis, hybrids and Emberkin alike, became the bridge between worlds. They learned the old songs and invented new ones. They studied the glyphs, asked questions, and dreamed bigger than any generation before. Some spoke of journeys to the stars, of ships that could cross the void Mason had traveled, while others dreamed of gardens that would stretch from riverbank to mountain peak. One clear evening, as the village celebrated another harvest, Syrah pulled Mason aside. They stood atop a high platform, looking out over the lights of the thriving settlement. "Are you happy here?" she asked quietly, searching his face. He turned to her, cupping her cheek. "I found home in you. In them. I could never have dreamed of this." She pressed her forehead to his, her voice a promise. "We will always be equals, Mason. You are not just my mate, you are my heart, my mind, my future." He kissed her, slow and sure. "And you are mine." Below, their children's laughter rang out, a chorus of hope and unity. Lyra chased Taran through the ferns, while Syrah's youngest slept in her sling, dreaming of a world remade. Emberus thrived, united by the story of two hearts that found each other against all odds. Mason's legacy was everywhere, in the laughter that filled the air, in the bridges that linked once distant tribes, in the wisdom passed from parent to child. His humanity and ingenuity had forged a new path for an entire civilization. In time, the tale of the outlander who crashed on a world ruled by women became legend. Not just the story of a stranger's survival, but the story of the man who helped them find a brighter future, and the love that made it possible. Our story ends here. Our story. If you'd like to support us, you can use the Super Thanks button right under the video to leave a tip. It truly helps our team improve the quality of our work. We're grateful to each and every subscriber for being with us. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.